So my name is Lillian, and my title has since changed, so it's a bit different from what you see on the program over there. My initial title was a bit ambitious, and when I went into looking at feasibility, some things were not feasible, but not all is lost. Ultimately, now I'm looking at willingness to use pre-exposure prophylaxis, risk perception among HIV uninfected individuals in serodiscordant relationships. So a brief background. Efficacy of PrEP was demonstrated around here, around 2012. This is an incidence of HIV over the years. But you see from here, it hasn't really changed much up to now. So we just need to implement HIV prevention better. Sorry, it was a bit short.
I was fascinated by it, so I came here to read.
Okay, I'll send you the publication.
Okay, thank you.
And then, so basically, regarding PrEP in serodiscordant couples, we have been through efficacy trials, effectiveness trials, and right now the Ministry of Health priorities are on rolling out in a phased manner. And so some of the priority areas are training providers, retaining those who have initiated in care, risk assessment, and demand generation for PrEP. So the overall aim of my study is to assess willingness to use pre-exposure prophylaxis among HIV uninfected partners who are in relationships with partners who are already receiving ART, and to examine the impact of risk perception on willingness to use PrEP. So a lot of evidence regarding PrEP up until now has been focused on couples where the HIV-infected partner is just initiating PrEP, whereby PrEP is being used as bridge. But we know that the risk of HIV transmission can still exist, especially since people have been presenting about viral load suppression and non-suppression, even after 12 months of being on ART. So my first objective is to assess willingness to use PrEP. And then the second objective is to assess the relationship between willingness to use PrEP and risk perception. And then thirdly, I want to determine the relationship between perceived and measured risk of HIV acquisition. So this study will be conducted at the IDI clinic in Mulago, and I want to enroll HIV uninfected individuals in stable heterosexual relationships with clients who are attending IDI. So the inclusion criteria, the main one is that the HIV-infected partner should have been receiving ART for at least 3 months at that time. And then those who do not intend to have a sexual relationship will be excluded. It's a cross-sectional study, and I'll use a proportionate stratified sampling to sample the uninfected partners. So the IDI has a database where they keep track of the discordant couples. So I'll stratify by viral load suppression status, whereby I'll put undetected viral load in one stratum, low level viremia, and then detectable viral load above 1,000 in the other stratum. And so my sample size is 236, which comes down to 160 after correcting for a finite population. And then I'll settle down to 180 to correct for non-response. So I basically want to just administer questionnaires, and on these questionnaires I'll be collecting social demographic information, and then also information about risk factors for acquiring HIV, like sexual behaviors and so on. And then also I'll talk about the variables later. But then the other thing is to objectively assess risk among these uninfected partners. And there I'll use a validated risk scores tool that was used for the partners PrEP demonstration study. And Uganda was also part of this study. So for objective 1, the endpoint is willingness to use PrEP. And there will be several predictors, one of which is perceived risk of HIV acquisition. That is the main predictor, and it's in objective 2. So, but the other predictors that will be evaluated in the multivariable models will include also some factors of the HIV-infected partner, factors that are known to increase risk of HIV transmission, like the viral load of the HIV-infected partner, the adherence, and also the circumcision status, and so on. So the last objective, objective 3, the endpoint is proportions of participants objectively assessed as high risk, but then perceive themselves as low risk. And also vice versa. Those who are at low risk, but perceive themselves as high risk. So up until now, I've been able to get IRB approval, and I'm looking forward to start data collection in the in the coming days, and probably be done by early May. If I give it 2 months to collect, by mid-May, 2 months to collect this data. If I interview at least six per day, I'll be able to collect the data within 2 months. And then data analysis will be concurrent and will be completed once I'm done with collecting the data. So hopefully I will have a draft ready by end of May and get ready to submit it to the school by end of June to early July. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lillian, and right on time. As other questions come, it's just a phrasing, I think, of the first objective. Is it that do you start with the perception of the person with non-HIV infection about their risk of infection that will influence their willingness to? That's probably that is, but sure you have an answer. Other comments, questions? Moses?
Thank you. I say this willingness, so the whole population is of discordant couples.
Uninfected, the infected partner. But yes.
So there are discordant couples, but the focus is the uninfected partner in the relationship. And you are asking, of course this depends whether they are women or men. If a woman is the
uninfected,
is the infected one, well, it depends. There may be some gender differences in willingness. Now, this willingness to use PrEP, is it willingness to start? Willingness to take it over time? Because I mean, as many people who are doing PrEP studies know, there are proportions willing to start. At 3 months, they are falling off. At 6 months, they are fewer. Am I right? It's kind of a cascade.
Yeah.
So here you are measuring willingness to even start at all. To consider. I'm not saying it is.
No, that's true, but I was more inclined to what you're saying initially, but I later realized that it's very difficult to measure if someone is really willing to continue. Like you ask them, are you willing to, when you start, are you willing to even continue? It's very subjective, and the reviewers had a problem with that, so I took it out.
So
I'm just willingness to consider at the beginning.
At a given point, you meet that person. At a given point, when you meet that person, the willingness at that point.
It's to start.
But you can't assess whether they're willing to continue. Because they haven't even tested it.
They haven't even tested
their willingness to start.
So the willingness to start will be verbal or will be qualified by actually starting?
They are not.
No, they're not starting. They haven't started yet. They'll start later. So yeah, it's just
so they are willing to start. but they haven't started.
They haven't started.
So it's only verbal. It's not like they are swallowed the first dose.
Yes, they haven't. It's very subjective. Yes. Although I'd like to say that.
And it's of course affected by. So do they call it social desirability?
Bias.
The bias.
Yes,
The bias.
That's what, which question are you asking? What question do you ask the person to assess willingness? Just the question, because I want you to ask me or to ask
So, once PrEP is offered, are you willing to take it up?
Yes. And remember that I may start asking you whether I understand what is PrEP, what will it do. Before I say yes, of course, I will say yes. Because the issue of social desirability is going to come so much that people may. I'm going to see how do you ask that question in such a way that what you hear is not what you think you want to hear versus what is the reality in that it.
So I have thought about that, and that's why the research assistants are people who have been working with discordant couples. I actually met them and they said they'll be very open. They'll say they are very comfortable with the people collecting data. They are just not new people. They are counselors who have been working with them. So I hope that will help. But also, yes, I've not yet collected data, and I'm open to get advice on how best to ask that question, if you have any suggestions.
It's related.
But I want to answer you.
Okay. I had a deal finished actually.
Yeah, I finished.
Because some of these things you want to see like what would help to advance the PrEP program. Do you know what I mean?
I understand.
It's good to ask people, are you willing to start? And they say, well, I'm willing, why I'm not. But I'm just wondering how you will use that to inform the people struggling with rolling out PrEP. That, okay, I found 90% were willing to start. I'm just wondering what kind of policy implication that will have in the PrEP program. Now, I'm not saying that your study is bad. I'm just saying to think about it.
Yeah.
And the second one was this perception. Of course, what is perception? Maybe it is defined in your. So I perceive myself to be at low risk or at high risk. Because we know discordant couples are at risk. Aren't we? So they may not perceive themselves that way.
So that's the point of objective number 3. Because we know you and I know that they're at risk, but the way they perceive themselves might be different.
Okay.
And it has been, at least for other populations like MSM, it has happened. There are many studies that have been published about the discordance between self-perceived risk and then the actual risk that is usually determined by validated tools.
But even in the clinic, people ask us if I need to get it for all the 7 years that I've been with this person. Why now?
And so also about the policy thing, maybe people start off taking PrEP and 3 months down the road, you're looking at weird retention rates. Maybe it's that risk perception. So if I'm able to see that clearly, risk perception and the actual objective risk are different, maybe we need to find other ways of telling people that you're really at risk. Something like that. I don't know if that is helpful.
Actually, the reason why I was asking is that many people think if you are virally suppressed, the risk is very, very low. Not many people, but it's been proven. The risk is very low if your partner is suppressed. So I may really say, and truthfully so, I may say my risk is low. It's low because my partner is suppressed. And will you take me to have?
So,
do you know what I mean?
I get what I mean. I hope I can make you understand also. No. By the time you're having problems with understanding what I want to do, maybe I need to change some things. So yes, but there will be that objective tool for measuring risk, and viral load suppression is one of those. And so those will be the category of uninfected individuals who actually perceive themselves the way they are. But my hypothesis is that there are some people who are at high risk, actual high risk, but perceive themselves as high risk. Yeah.
So will you assess?
There is also risk outside of the
Partners from most of the forms you are formatted, it was from elsewhere when they typed. So probably we are excluded because they are former partners are on ART, but for them they are still at risk from elsewhere.
So it's one of the variables. I think it would have been better if I had displayed my framework, but external partners is one of the variables I'm going to collect as well. Yes.
Thank you, Lillian, for a very interesting study. I was just wondering whether it would have been nice to ask this question on the qualitative, because it would probably give you more meaningful information than someone saying, yes, I'm willing or not. Because behind those yeses and those no's and perception, there's so much else there in the context, which will give you a better understanding how people think and feel and you know what their root thoughts are behind this. So I just think that it would, you might want to consider that.
I strongly agree with what you're saying, but I'll discuss with you where I was not able to add qualitative. It's other constraints I don't want to speak about.
Just for the fact that she's an anthropologist.
No, she's absolutely right, and my initial design was to actually have
so
a mixed methods. Yeah, I understand. I think it's very important, but it was time constraints and feasibility issues why I couldn't. But yeah, I would like to see qualitative as well. And I'm not an anthropologist.
So you don't have to I just add, it really will be, I just want to add to what the professor said, it will really strengthen, and it should, the qualitative, I know it doesn't take as much time, but I think talking with the professor will help, because it will really strengthen your studies. And it's nice to know how people think, and different groups think differently, so it would really strengthen it. I don't know if you've already got approval, so maybe we would have to go back.
Yeah, they can amend it.
So is Professor Anne willing to know? I'm helping, I'm entering Lillian. And that component was the approach presented to the School of Public Health. All the questions were around the qualitative component, and to take a lot of time. And she wanted to finish in a reasonable amount of time as a student. So maybe Professor Anne can help if she can do afterwards.
Because if she's a student, then I think it would take too long to go back. But it would certainly have strengthened her study and her.
But maybe there is a beginning of something that we see soon after this, because you are here, Professor is here, and she's here. So for those, as we end this, for these patients, the partners, are you going to inquire whether they know their partner's viral load? Whether
Absolutely.
It's detectable or undetectable, how high it is, and whether that has an impact on their...
Yeah, it's one of the predictors that will be considered as well. So we'll actually collect the actual viral load from the chat reviews, but then we'll ask, do you know? And if you know, please tell us what it is.
Okay.
And then so what
Then
we see.
you compare.
Exactly.
Okay. Good. So, thank you.
What do you mean by relationship?
I had problems stating this objective, and I knew it would come up. So what I basically mean is to see, are they congruent or not? Perceived risk and measured risk in the face of these uninfected individuals, are they congruent or not?
Right.
Association.
Measured risk.
Yes? How do you know objectively that somebody is at risk? They are what, an STD or they get pregnant or...
So there are tools that have been validated. according to their age, continuous status of their family.